In the wake of the July 2016 coup attempt and the referendum to give Turkey's president vast new powers, the state of press freedom in Turkey is dire. Some 150 journalists are behind bars, and more than 170 media outlets have been shuttered amid the ongoing state of emergency and an accompanying purge in which hundreds of thousands of people in Turkey have been detained or fired from their jobs. Despite claiming that all imprisoned journalists are terrorists and that charges against them are unrelated to journalism, Turkey's government has released little to no supporting evidence. Instead, prosecutors point to journalists' news reporting or other critical writings. These cases can't help but be viewed as a bid by Turkey's government to silence criticism and hinder accountability. To combat this, IPI, with our Turkey National Committee and international partners, continues to work to emphasize the severity of the situation, to push the Turkish government to honor its human rights commitments, and to encourage foreign governments to press Turkey to do so as well. IPI is also highlighting the plight of imprisoned journalists and working to support them in cases before the European Court of Human Rights. And we're working to show them and their families, as well as all journalists in Turkey, that we stand with them in solidarity. On World Press Freedom Day, we reiterate, criticizing a government can't be deemed to equal support for anyone who opposes that government, nor can criticism alone show an intent to support or engage in violence. That's a fundamental principle, one IPI will continue to fight for until every journalist held in Turkey in connection with his or her work is freed.
Was mit dem Referendum passiert ist das, was vorher so genannt de facto so.
Restriction on press freedom in Turkey are certainly one of the biggest concerns at IPI, but unfortunately is not the only one. The same type of patterns that we observe in Turkey, we also observe them elsewhere. Maybe not to the same extent, but equally aimed at limiting independent journalism. To give you an example, take digital attacks. Digital attacks has become a global phenomenon. We hear about attacks carried out online against journalists from Indonesia to Pakistan, across Europe, Russia, to Latin America. This is a very global trend, and IPI studies has shown that almost 0.5% of the attacks against journalists perpetrated online are what we defined as verbal smear, are attacks aimed at discrediting journalists because of their work.
The reason you're my first stop is that, as you know, I have a running war with the media. They are among the most dishonest human beings on earth.
A new phenomenon that we have seen emerging in recent years is that of fake news, so-called fake news. The problem we see in connection with the dissemination of fake news is dual. On one hand, there is certain problem related to the content of it, to the content of media, and the challenges among audiences in understanding what information can and should be trusted. This has led to also a lack of trust in those sources of information which traditionally have been considered as trusted. Quality media, quality newspaper, independent newspaper. The outcome of this broad dissemination of fake news and the manipulation by populist leaders of the terminology of the term fake news has led to also lack of trust in quality, independent information. Unfortunately, while there appears to be the need to stop the dissemination of so-called fake news, on the other hand, exactly the same type of laws are used by more repressive governments to stop the dissemination of legitimate, critical journalism. So what we are talking about as remedies which are needed in order to protect quality information is turning into restrictions for independent, critical coverage. And that is a serious problem for press freedom.